Welcome, everybody, to the ATC Network. This is another special edition podcast we're bringing you. And today we're talking to Dr. KJ Foster from Fostering Resilience, which is your company. It's something, your creation. And we're going to talk a lot about that. You may have seen Dr. Foster on some of our other shows, KJ, if you will, on some of our other shows, talking about some of the great work she does in treatment and different things. But this is your baby. This Fostering Resilience is your baby. And before people get concerned about the big word resilience and all the other stuff and fostering, in case you're wondering, I think she stole some of that from her last name, but I'm not positive. But before you get concerned about that, let's if you want to think of it this way, it's a family program. It's about helping families recover as a whole, not just the client with the problem or the individual with the issues. It's about the entire family healing. And we're going to get involved in that. But so don't get worried about the big words and everything. But KJ, it's good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Right. And I'm excited to talk about this with you because coming as a parent of two children with issues,
right,
and being the son of somebody with issues, and then being a parent who had their own issues, I got it from all ends.
Right.
And what I know is that one person with an addiction issue affects every member of that family.
Absolutely. So you have the key piece, which is first having that awareness and that understanding that it's not just my loved one. You know, this is something that is impacting everyone. And I want to say to also, looking at the word family, like how we define family, what I'm talking about when I use the word family is anyone that you're in a close relationship with. That could be, any loved one, any partnership, relationship, anybody that you consider to be family. It doesn't necessarily have to be your family of origin, but as a part of the recovery process, who are the people that have been surrounding you and are going to be surrounding you as a part of your recovery process, because those are family.
Who are the influencers in your life? I mean,
exactly.
And that could be business partners, it could be best friends, it could be your bowling team. It really kind of extends. I agree. And we are so prolific in spreading our illness. I mean, and it's not like people with addiction issues are out running around saying, "I'm going to make your life miserable."
Right.
Unfortunately, it's a byproduct that's unavoidable. Nobody comes out unscathed, do they?
Right. No. Everybody winds up being impacted. Everyone winds up experiencing a level of suffering as a result. So, one of the things that is a major focus of the resources that I provide is that they're all compassion-based. So it's learning how to practice self-compassion, because whether you're the individual that experienced the addiction and is now, seeking to recover, you've experienced a level of suffering as a result of that addiction. Nobody wants to be addicted. Nobody chooses as like a young child, what do you want to be, Johnny, when you grow up? I want to be an addict. I want to grow up to be addicted to alcohol.
They didn't have a table at the career fair.
Right.
It wasn't like police, military.
Yeah, this is what I want to do.
Dope addicts.
I want to make my family members miserable. And, as a part of my own recovery, that's something that I experience because I'm someone who's recovered we have kind of similar. I've recovered myself from an addiction to alcohol. I have a son who has recovered from an addiction to drugs. And when he was addicted, I went through this feeling of this belief and this outlook. Like my attitude was, look at what you're doing to me. Like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And as family members, we think from that perspective, like, my loved one is doing this to me. They're not doing it to you. They don't want to be hurting other people. Even though sometimes it doesn't feel that way, it doesn't look that way. Like I said, people don't set out to become addicted. And now we're learning so much more, thank you God, about how addiction really develops. That the truth is anyone could be, the right circumstances in place, anyone can become addicted. It's not a moral failing. It's not a character defect. It's what happens as the result of a combination of biology and environment and trauma and being prescribed a medication from your physician that you don't know is addictive.
There's a certain victim of circumstance that happens, certainly.
Exactly.
But it's a combination of, it could be any combination of those, any one of those, or even maybe something we haven't even mentioned yet.
Right.
But none of that is somebody who said, I'm going to become a heroin addict and screw up my life and my family.
Right.
Nobody does that.
Exactly.
But sometimes they're treated like that's what they did.
Exactly.
You know?
Addiction, substance use disorders, because I like to use that terminology best because I think it really describes it better than, when we're talking about addiction, when we say the word addiction, we're talking about a severe substance use disorder. We could have mild substance use disorder, moderate, and severe. But when we're talking about a severe substance use disorder, I mean, that person is not setting out to destroy themselves. They're not setting out to destroy their family members, although it can feel that way sometimes. Substance use disorders, people who experience substance use disorders, especially severe addiction, are the only individuals who are treated with such contempt and condemnation. Any other illness that we experience, whether it be diabetes, cancer, people look at it as you're doing this to yourself. You're choosing to do this. So they treat them with contempt. They condemn them. And what they don't realize is that by doing that, you are actually making that person's addiction stronger by treating them that way.
You are aware, we've talked about this before, you are aware that there are still some programs, not as many, thank God, that still believe in breaking people down, assigning blame, assigning shame is a way to help people. And I think you and I are on the same page.
Yeah.
Listen, they were living in shame and blame and guilt and fear and self-loathing. Giving them more of that just drives them deeper.
Exactly.
They need hope. They need support. They need unconditional love, but with barriers too. They do need lines drawn in the sand.
Right.
But the shame and guilt no longer works. And so many families still utilize that.
Right.
Why is that? Is it because of the hopelessness that they're feeling, or is it because they think it would work? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, guilt is different than shame, and guilt is healthy. Guilt is good. We need to experience guilt in order to reach out and get help. Because when we experience guilt, it's all about, I'm feeling bad about the things I've done, and that, really is what I think encourages people to reach out and get help because of the things that we wind up doing as a result of active addiction, because of the craving. And I don't think there's anybody that I've ever met who's experienced an addiction who hasn't shared with me and experienced doing things that they never would have done had they been sober. Compromises our prefrontal cortex. We don't think things through. We're just completely driven by, primitive instincts and emotions, and so we're not thinking things through. And so guilt is healthy, and it helps us to reach out and actually get help because of the things that we do when
if it's defined like regret, where it's like there's that, but a lot of people will take that guilt and turn it into a shame,
right?
And that way nothing ever changes because then they just hide.
Well, because the shame is internal. That's the big difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is external. Guilt is the behavior. Guilt is I feel bad about the things that I've done, what I've said, how I've behaved, and it's externalized. Shame is internalized. Shame is that feeling that I'm defective in some way. I'm unlovable. I'm broken. Like, that's why I don't like using the words broken and shattered and because that then implies that that's who you truly are. And the addiction is not who the person is. The addiction is a mental illness that that person is experiencing that they can recover from. But when we label it as such, I don't even like using the words addict or alcoholic.
Right, I understand.
Because they're so shame-based. They're so much like, this is your identity, this is who you are, and it's not. It's an experience that you're having. It's a mental illness that you're experiencing, and you can recover from that. You can fully recover. You can recover to the extent that your life will be, you and your life will be better than you've ever been before. That was my experience. That's been my son's experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I use the same terminology. I'll use the terms, and people hear me all the time, I'll say people who suffer from addiction.
Right.
Instead of just saying they're an addict or they're an alcoholic, people who suffer from alcoholism, people who suffer from addiction. It is a part of them, but it does not define them. However, and especially coming from a family's perspective, every bit of that person is affected by this.
Sure.
So it's easy to see where somebody would say, they're just an addict, everything about them is an addict. Because that's what's being projected, because everything, all of their reactions and actions and emotions and everything else is really being run by the addiction at this point. So it's hard to make that separation sometimes. And I see how family members can get frustrated, right?
Right. Well, I think the key for me is that when you're using that terminology during the recovery process, when your loved one is recovering, if you're still referring to them as an addict, as an alcoholic, that's not going to be healthy, because then you're just feeding that identity. Because some family members, and we've talked about this before, don't want to allow their loved one to be released from that role, released from that identity. So they keep kind of trying to put them in that box and keep them in that box. And I see that with a lot of family members, especially siblings. Siblings who are used to being the good one, the one who does everything right. And then all of a sudden, Susie is starting to get better and she's recovering and she's not, engaging in these negative behaviors anymore. And the sister is like, well, wait a minute, I'm the good one. And so they want to put them back in that box. But you're a this, remember, you're a this.
Right,
and it's like, no, that you don't have to stay an alcoholic. You don't have to stay a drug addict. You can recover. And I know it's a very controversial, thing, but I'll use myself as an example. I do not consider myself an alcoholic. I am not an alcoholic. I'm not consumed with a desire to drink alcohol. I choose not to drink alcohol. It's a healthy lifestyle choice. Did I struggle with drinking and with alcoholism 13 years ago? Yes, but currently, for me to continue to call myself an alcoholic, I believe very much in neuro-linguistic programming.
Absolutely.
And what we feed our brains and no, I am fully recovered from that. And my identity is so much more than this experience that I had. Granted, I live my life like, helping people with that identity and learning how to break free from that, so that that's not keeping them confined. I think a lot of the reason why people struggle with sobriety is because they think to themselves, I'm always going to be, especially people that say, remember, you're always going to be an alcoholic. Remember, you're always going to be. How hopeless is that?
Well, and KJ, I couldn't agree with you more, because I'm always been of that mindset that, if you've got a number of years clean and sober and you're still thinking I might use today, there's something else is going on.
Right.
If and alcoholism and drug addiction cannot be solved by taking the drug and the alcohol away. It's about a change of your life.
Yes.
It's a change of thinking. It's a change. And when you start to live within that change, then yes, I do consider myself recovered as well. Does that mean I drink? No, I can't, because I have an allergy to it. And it's like, if you no longer have cancer, you don't walk around saying I'm cancer.
Right.
Now, if you put cancer back in your body or do something that causes you to have cancer again, then you're more susceptible. It's going to happen. If I put alcohol in my body, it's all back to the races. I know that. But as I live my life today, I am not walking around saying, oh, I'm an alcoholic. And I think sometimes we do that because I think it inhibits us from growing to our full potential when
Right.
we do that.
Absolutely. And you said a key thing there with the people don't say I am cancer or I am an
Yes.
cancer, right? They say I have cancer
Or had,
or
if
had
it's over.
or had, right?
Yes.
I had alcoholism, right?
Yeah.
I am not a or an. Anytime we use the word a or an before the identifier, then that's a label. We're like labeling ourselves. So learning how to speak in a way that gives you more freedom. That's not like, this is a death sentence. This is something that you're going to be afflicted with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Just having that mindset can create relapse.
Yes. And I try to explain it, in a certain way. And, I know we're kind of straight away from the
Yeah, we
family
have.
stuff for a moment, but I know we're passionate about
Yeah,
this.
we
And it's
are.
great that we have
Yeah.
these same passions. It's like, listen, there's a part of me that's always going to love alcohol, and it's always going to, I'm never going to say I hate it. And I love people who say, I hated it, but I kept doing it. No, I hate Brussels sprouts. I don't eat them. I
Right.
loved alcohol. That's why I drank it. But
Right.
I realized that love was killing me and all those bad things were happening. So now it's no longer a part of my life. I'm not involved with it anymore. If I ever choose to get involved with it, I'll be sick again.
Right.
But I'm not. It's not what I am. But, I love the smell of gasoline. I never once thought about drinking it.
Right.
Because I've resigned myself to say, that's not something that works in my life, to drink gasoline. Alcohol is the same thing. I'm no longer suffering. I am no longer, under its spell. If I ever return to it, it's because it's something I would choose. And if I'm choosing that, it means I'm not doing something right in my life. That's all.
Well, and this
Does that
is
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. This is how I describe it to clients and to family members. Is that when I'm actively, if I were actively drinking alcohol, or if your family member is actively drinking or using, they are in an abusive relationship with themselves.
Oh, yes.
It's an abusive relationship with self. And how hard is it to get out of an abusive relationship? It's really hard. So just thinking in terms of, have you ever had a toxic relationship where you really loved that person, or you thought you loved that person, right? But you knew that
Everyone.
that this relationship is really bad for me,
Except
right?
your current one, though.
No, I'm not talking about my current one. Well, my current one is an example of a healthy relationship.
Yes.
In healthy relationships, you bring out the best in each other, right? You build each other up.
Right.
You become better people as a result of the relationship. But there have been relationships I've had that brought out the worst in me and were toxic in every way. And it was really hard to get myself out of that relationship, or to even admit that, this was a problem and I needed to seek some other,
Well, you
some
become
other way to
dependent
live.
on the toxicity of the
Right,
relationship.
Exactly.
And so when there's moments of calm, it's almost uncomfortable.
Right.
It's like, wow,
It's like-
I got to cause a fight so
Right.
that I can know where I'm at. I think it's the same thing with alcohol. I mean, we may have all those, or drugs. You may have that next morning with your head in the toilet saying, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I'm never doing this again. But within minutes, usually, it's
Right.
some sort of reconciliation. Yeah, but you know what? I still, and that's hard. But let's get back to fostering resilience, because I think it's important that we do this. I would love to have you back and we could do this whole show, because I got a whole thing on powerlessness I'd love to get your opinion on. It says we were powerless, not are powerless.
Right,
It says we
we're
were.
powerless.
All right. Anyway, so let's say every addict has 10 people that they directly affect. Does that sound like about a fair number? Every person who's
sure.
has addiction problems affects 12 people, 10 people, 8 people.
I would say, depending upon the size of your family, that it could be as small as 4 or 5. That is,
But it could be
really
as big as 20 or 30.
Sure,
So let's say
absolutely.
on average everybody reaches 10 people that
Yeah.
they directly affect with their addiction issues.
Right.
Okay? So we've got all these programs out there for the person suffering from the addiction, but then we're tenfolding that in
Yeah.
people who really their only option, which, and by the way, I'll bring up Alan on. I think it's a great program,
Yeah.
and it does great things.
Absolutely.
But there should be so much more than that.
Right.
I mean, some of these people have been abused through this addiction, have abused themselves through this addiction, have created patterns and self-destructive behaviors, and just anxiety and sadness and depression.
Sure.
Who is helping them?
Right.
It seems like it's like, wow.
Yeah, there's very few programs out there that treat family members. There are a few. There's one in Tennessee, and I always forget their name. And they're really good, but they're hugely expensive. There's no insurance, so like codependency isn't deemed as a true mental illness, even though I believe that it is. But it's still one of those things that's so behind the times when it comes to it being a part of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And if and when, hopefully at some point it does, then there'll be treatment centers that can actually treat family members, because I truly believe that if we were able to reach more family members and more family members understood the role that they play and how powerful their own change is in supporting their loved one, that would increase the success rate drastically.
It has to.
Yeah.
It has to. Just the support that you would get from a whole family healing in unison. Not all the exact same path, and they all have different needs.
Right.
But the unison of we are all healing.
Right.
Instead of just pointing and saying, you're the problem.
Right. Because even though maybe that person has been the problem, right, is the one that's creating the problem within the family, everybody in the family is impacted in a way in which they're responding to that, right? Yes. So there's so much, you mentioned it, there's fear, there's anger, there's depression, there's anxiety. And what happens is that the whole family becomes sick in those negative emotions that are going back and forth and all around within the relationship with that loved one. And so you treat the loved one, and if nobody else in the family is getting any kind of support, healing, then you put that loved one back in that environment, and their likelihood to relapse is really high, because none of the other people are getting the help that they need, that they a lot of times don't even realize that they need.
They don't. And it's like if addiction and alcoholism was a bomb and it came down and it directly hit the person who's suffering from the addiction.
Right.
The bomb went off. But you know what? The bomb was filled with poisonous gas too. And that spread out. Now all the people on the peripherals, now they're sick too.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Not in the same way, and maybe not to the same degree, but they are sick.
Right.
And they need help. You can't just focus on where the bomb landed. You got to look at all the peripheral damage. Yeah. This is what we're talking about with families. And we are all susceptible. And I know as a person who is sober, in recovery, recovered, whatever you want to say, as a person who is sober today, I still felt the effects of what my daughter was going through.
Sure.
And all my knowledge of helping other people and all my knowledge of going to meetings and going and working in treatment and even in the addiction training center here, I could help people all day long. But then when I look in the mirror, there was still a little bit of blame, a little bit of anger, a little bit, and it started to build, and I had to find a way out of it. We are not immune to it.
Right. Well, and one of the things that I've shared with you before is one of the hardest family members to work with and to get through to is the family member that has achieved their own recovery, right? So they have been a part of their own recovery program. They have all this knowledge about recovery, and they think, I don't have to participate in my loved one's recovery. I'm recovered. I have all of this information about recovery. I'm good. There's nothing you're going to teach me. And what they don't understand is that their recovery, their awarenesses, and their areas of change are totally different than what they've focused on for their own personal recovery. And that was what I needed to learn, because it wasn't until I was 9 months sober, and everyone, because my son and I were very much on a parallel path in terms of our addiction experience, because we both experienced addiction as a result of a major trauma we went through. And so we both dealt with it in very similar ways. So as I was drinking, he was experimenting with drugs. He started smoking pot, and then that led to ultimately becoming addicted to oxys, which that was when it was first exploding and they
Yeah.
were everywhere. And so as his addiction progressed, my drinking progressed. Like he became, I had more issues with his using. Oh, how do I deal with it? I drink more. And so I finally, got sober, and people were telling me, and he was getting worse at that time, and people were saying, KJ, you really need to go to Al-Anon as well as, your own recovery program. And I was like, whoa, like, I can only handle so much at one time. Like, you guys want me to do Al-Anon too? Are you crazy? And that's the thing that I'll hear, the biggest resistance to participating in their own recovery that I hear from family members. I don't have time. Like, I'm so busy. Like, there's no time for this. And I was the same way. Like, I don't have time to do this. But when I was in enough pain, which is when we're willing to change, is when we're in enough pain where the pain to stay the same is more painful than trying to change, I started going to Al-Anon at 9 months sober, and I learned things that I would have never learned in my program. I learned ways in which I was behaving and responding to him that were enabling him to, not only enabling him in ways that were allowing him to continue were supporting and perpetuating the addiction that I had no idea, but also ways in which I was making it harder on him, and I had no idea because of the ways that I was responding to him that were unhealthy, and lots of anger and frustration, and making it all about me. Look at what you're doing to me. You're ruining my life. It's like so. Really critical awarenesses that I gained, and so my company. How this all came about, my baby, how it was all developed, it stemmed from being that person who was the family member, had no idea how I was impacting him, and being so desperate for more resources, like being so desperate, like I would be home and searching on the internet for information and just wanting more and more knowledge of what I can do, how I can help, and there not being much aside from Al-Anon. Like I could not find anything else out there besides Al-Anon, and there were just some things like, Al-Anon says you don't cause it, you can't cure it, you can't control it, and I absolutely believe 2 out of the 3 of those, and it's not like I believe I contributed. So maybe cause is too strong of a word.
No, but there is certainly a contributing factor.
Right. Like I had a hard time buying into that I didn't cause it. Like I felt like a sense of as a parent, It's different when you're a spouse, but even as a spouse, you don't necessarily cause it, but you can contribute to it in ways that you have no idea. Mm-hmm. And so this educational piece, this, and
conversely, you can contribute to their recovery as well.
Right. Exactly. So what are you contributing to? That's what I ask people. What are you contributing to? So just as much as the person who's recovering is really looking at, okay, how are my choices? How's my behavior? Is it, taking me closer to a drink or a drug, or is it taking me further away? Is it contributing to my success or to potential relapse? Family members have to learn how to think in that way too. Like,
yes.
Is how I'm responding to this contributing to relapse, or is it contributing to, supporting their recovery? And where am I maybe supporting too much that I shouldn't be and that's really hard to navigate without having somebody to help you through those decisions. So what I learned is that as the family member, I needed somebody to guide me. I needed my own support group. I needed education about, spiritual practice, how I could start getting out of that swamp of anger, resentment, frustration, fear, to become more forgiving, compassionate, loving in my approach. So those are the key aspects that I focus in on. And so my company provides education for the family members and individuals, because a lot of what I offer is also helpful to individuals, but primarily, family members, and meditation has changed my life. We really have to learn how to rewire our brains in so many different aspects. So meditation, teaching family members, individuals, how meditation that is medication, it is your medication,
right.
Meditation, how that is going to help you to navigate and those negative emotions. And then meetings, something that is really unique about the meetings that I offer meetings via Zoom every single day. So there's an option every day. They are inclusive of the individual and family members. So at any given time, if you participate in a meeting, there'll be a certain number of people who are the individuals themselves who are recovering, and then there'll be the family member. And my belief as somebody who has experienced both perspectives is that there's value in learning from each side, so to speak. I don't like that terminology.
Well, not
each
to
perspective.
The keeping like their side's the secretive kind of thing where we don't talk. Open communication is really, really big in a family healing.
Yeah.
And not to mention in somebody's extended recovery as opposed to relapse.
Right.
Because it's like we can't keep these deep, dark secrets.
Right.
We've got to bring it to the light of day and, nothing makes everything okay. I understand there's still work to do. But to somewhat normalize the conversation so that way it can be had when it needs to be had. If we don't talk about it openly, when they start to struggle, how can they talk?
Right. And how can you then be compassionate? Because empathy is key, right? So having, and it's key to reducing shame. And as I've, talked about or talk about a lot is the role that shame plays in relapse and how just dangerous and detrimental that is to the recovery process. And empathy is the key factor in bringing down that shame, which makes support groups in general so effective because you're a part of a group of people who are going through the same feelings and experiences. So you have that me too experience. Like, you go to whatever it is, an AA, CA, you go to a grief group, you go to a divorce group, who are you meeting there? You're meeting people who are experiencing or have experienced the same thing that you're going through. You have that Me Too experience of being able to relate to that person, and family members experience the same thing at Al-Anon and ones that are specific. But what I believe is even more critical than empathy is compassion, because as a family member, I'm a little different in that I've experienced both sides, but a lot of family members haven't, and they don't understand, they don't get it. They can't have that Me Too experience because they're like, you're crazy. Like, what? Yeah. I don't get why you're doing what you're doing. So they can't experience empathy with their family member, but they can experience compassion. They can practice loving kindness. They can recognize that they're not the only one, that their loved one is not the only one, that they as the loved one is not the only one experiencing this, that common humanity, and they can learn how to practice mindful awareness, which the mindful meditation is so important. So those three, so each of the groups and everything, all of my programs, I have self-paced family programs online, I have live interactive family programs, I have a mindfulness meditation course that I offer. All of that is supported by this self-compassion component. And Kristen Neff is who I, tell everybody, go and check out her website, read her book, Self-Compassion. But everything that I do is focused on the three components that she identified in her research on self-compassion, which are the practicing loving kindness, being kinder and gentler to ourselves, the common humanity, I'm not alone, I'm not the only one, and then the mindful awareness, practicing that mindfulness meditation.
Wow, so much.
Yeah.
Now, Fostering Resilience completely online?
Right now, I'm developing an app that I'm really excited about. Oh. So, yeah, that's going to be coming out fairly soon. So that'll be like soon.
Quick access to help and information and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
More user-friendly, easier to access all the information right there on your phone.
Now, I assume you have scheduled meetings and scheduled meeting groups and different things
Every
that you do.
day. Mm-hmm.
Are there resources available for people if they're at like 3:00 in the morning and they, do you have those kind of resources?
So I have a YouTube channel that is, so everything is tied together. So I have the YouTube channel that provides educational videos, meditation videos, music meditation, and also recovery support group meetings that have been filmed. And so let's say 3:00 in the morning, there's no like Zoom meeting, there's not a live meeting. You can go onto YouTube and watch and participate, because I do mindfulness meditation as a part of the group. So you can just watch one of the videos and be a part of a meeting for an hour at 3:00 in the morning when you're struggling. So everything that I offer, like on YouTube, it's a part of, it connects to my platform, the website, and then also now the app will be a part of that. So just, my goal and my passion is about providing resources to family members that will help them then support their loved one in ways that will contribute to their recovery success.
Now, obviously, somebody who's maybe, if we've got somebody coming out of a treatment or is new in recovery, brand new, and then the family wants to get involved and they all want to get help. What about for a family that, and we see this a lot, where they think everything's okay and everything's kind of going along, and then you realize they're like, even a year or year and a half in, the client, the one who's suffering from addiction, is at the tail end of their post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Their brain is just about done rewiring, but there's still so many issues. Are you there for those families as well, the ones who we've had recovery for a while, but we've never addressed certain issues and we really want to?
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think that the resources that I offer are really beneficial to people themselves that are new to recovery, and they're wanting to, I wouldn't necessarily recommend my program, so to speak, that I offer, like the meetings and the different workshops and programs, as a standalone for the individual who's new to recovery. I recommend that they engage in some sort of 12-step program or another program where they have somebody who's guiding them and so forth. But as an auxiliary, as an additional approach to, I would say, their spiritual practice, because self-compassion and the focus of the meetings being based in compassion really supports that spiritual component that helps the person deal with those negative emotions and that negative mindset. So those negative emotions and that negative mindset can be experienced by the person who's new to recovery, by the family members, by people who are maybe, just coming out of that post-acute withdrawals, but still struggling with the negative mindset. They're still struggling with that spiritual component, that what I offer can really help with that.
I know, and I want to bring this up before we wrap up, because first of all, Fostering Resilience, what is the website?
It's FR Program, for Fostering Resilience, frprogram.com.
frprogram.com. It's on your screen, and certainly the number's on your screen so you can call. But there are circumstances where families, maybe they're in denial, maybe they're just not ready to deal with certain things. There's a lot going on there. You can't force that. But or maybe they've made some changes, but then there's almost like this secondary trauma that happens where the client comes home, or the one suffering from the addiction comes home, and then all of a sudden they've dedicated themselves to this sober lifestyle. They're going to meetings, making new friends, they're doing all this stuff. And a lot of people who really get involved are on the go a lot, and they're really ensconced. Now there's almost an abandonment. Right. It's like, I carried you all this time while you were sick, and now you're getting better and you're not home. Right. It's an abandonment. Right. Is that a real issue?
Oh, sure. Sure. And there's also PTSD that family members experience. So, there are things that can happen that the loved one can do when they come home that triggers post-acute withdrawal, like certain, texts. I'm thinking of one client in particular where when his wife would say something in a particular way in a text message, it sent him into PTSD because it reminded him of things that, she said or did when she was actively using. And so those are situations that family members need help navigating, because what can happen is that family members can then, start to make accusations based upon their own PTSD that creates a situation where their loved one isn't using. Maybe they're going through post-acute withdrawal and they're experiencing a mood swing or irritability, and the loved one just automatically goes to, you've relapsed, you're using, you're whatever, because of their PTSD, and then create a problem that actually contributes to that rather than, supporting successful recovery. So and the abandonment. I have a client right now who's struggling with the fact that their daughter is no longer around because she's growing and she's successful in her recovery, and so she has a life now. And the mother's entire focus for years has been helping her daughter to manage her addiction and her recovery. And so now she feels this sense of, I'm no longer needed, I'm no longer wanted. And so those are real, issues that people struggle with.
And I think families are afraid to talk about that, but you need to, because it builds. There's two traumas that a family goes through that are very definite. One is seeing the abuse, and the other is watching them grow and leave you behind. And that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
You don't have to be left behind if you choose your own growth, though, right?
Exactly. And so getting involved with people who are experiencing some of the same things. And what I like to do is really help to normalize it for that individual. Like it's okay to be feeling what you're feeling. Like this is, it makes sense for you to be going through these feelings that you're having based upon the circumstances. And it also normalizes it for other people in the group. And this is where it can help both, the person who's recovering. I can't tell you how many times family members have shared, these struggles that they're having, where the individual who's recovering has gone, wow, you just really helped me with my relationship with my mom, because I had no idea that this might be how she's feeling. Those kinds of moments. That this is why I think it's really valuable, and it really works to have, a group of both perspectives together.
It's, we never used or drank in a bubble. We do not recover in a bubble. Everybody, all hands on deck, everybody should be involved, and everybody deserves recovery.
Right.
And not just somebody who is suffering directly from the affliction, but from the peripherals. They deserve to feel good and to be happy and productive as well. And I'm glad finally we're bringing some attention to it, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have bitten their lips and suffered in silence, watching their loved one either struggle or even succeed, but their suffering still goes on, and it's not right anymore. So thank you. Thank you so much, KJ.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Fostering Resilience, again, frprogram.com. You can go check it out. Give her a call at the number on the screen. But just be aware that everyone does deserve to get some help. Just because your son, daughter, mother, father, brother, sister, husband, or wife is the one who has the affliction doesn't mean you don't deserve to be happy as well. So get the help that you need. Reach out. I want to thank everybody for joining us. KJ, thank you once again.
Thank you.
You've been watching the ATC Network Special Programming Podcast, and brought to you by Addiction Training Center. Remember to join our YouTube page and share this with your friends. We'll catch you next time. I'm Scott Jones.